Hi everyone, my name's Gavin Sharrock. I'm the Business Development Director at Wiley, and the main part of my job is to help pharmaceutical industries and medcoms agencies work with societies. So I work with our proprietary list and our society list to help industry engage with the communities that we represent through those societies. So, why am I talking to you today? Why am I being here representing Wiley? The main thing, you can see here some of the facts and figures around Wiley. We publish over 1,600 journals, 9,000 books, lots of references, works and databases. We have strengths in major fields. This is the sort of thing that you'll hear from all the major publishers, so we're not differentiating ourselves there in this sense. The reason I'm talking to you about is that top bullet point there. So we are the largest society publisher. We publish with over 800 societies. We're actually affiliated with around about 1,200 associations and societies. So we're the publisher that engages with societies more than any other. So that puts us in a position of understanding societies, we understand their needs, we understand how the pharmaceutical industry, how medcoms agencies can work better with them. That's why I'm stood here today. Okay, so let's start with a few definitions here. What do we mean by a society? It's quite interesting to me when I talk to pharma companies and medcoms agencies about their lack of understanding in a lot of cases about what we mean by a society. Generally, we mean a membership-based organisational body around a thematic focus. Okay, that would be our definition. Now, there's many different forms of societies, so sometimes actually you have societies that don't really have a membership base. They may be affiliated with a membership base, but they don't actually have memberships themselves. A good example would be federations. We work with a number of different federations who have national societies as their members, but they don't actually have individual members themselves. When you're working with a federation, you'll find that actually it's very difficult to reach those end users because the federation wouldn't necessarily know who those end users are. So you have to be very careful when working with or thinking that you're getting access to those membership communities. The membership of our societies, they're usually academics, researchers and practitioners. Obviously in the medical space, there's going to be clinicians and practitioners as a good portion of them. The membership can represent a small or a large portion of the community. I often hear that there's an assumption that if you're interacting with a society, that society represents that community. It's not always the case. So if I was to take a hypothetical example, if you had the British Society of Elbow Surgery, that doesn't actually exist, but I hope it doesn't actually exist, I'm assuming it doesn't. If you had the British Society of Elbow Surgery and there's 1,000 elbow surgeons within the UK, you may find that the British Society of Elbow Surgery only actually represents 100. So they may only have 100 elbow surgeons as members. So actually it's not representative of the whole community, it's only a portion of it. You also find with societies that sometimes their membership stretches outside of the core group that you're looking for. So it's not just elbow surgeons, it could be nurse practitioners, it could be associated healthcare professionals, which may or may not be good news for you, but if you're trying to target a very small audience, you need to be very careful that that society represents who you're looking for. And we call them societies, but actually they can be associations, they can be colleges, foundations, departments, institutes, federations. They can call themselves various different things. We group them all under society and society publishing just as a definition. What do they look like? They vary completely. So they may be professionally run by a combination of salaried employees and volunteers. In fact, in the healthcare space, most of them will have salaried employees, we find. Outside of healthcare, you can get some very small societies that actually just run by volunteers. But in healthcare, there's going to be some level of salaried employees in most cases. It could be a very complex company style structure where actually you find it very hard to work out who you're supposed to talk to. It's like entering any other company. There'll be gatekeepers, you don't get to the department that you need to. But a lot of the medical societies, certainly if you're talking in Europe, are small enough so you can navigate around them very quickly. Depending on the size, they can have subgroups within the society. If you're interacting with a society, you've got to be very careful that you're working with the right subgroup. Sometimes it's not as obvious as it sounds. They can publish more than one journal. Quite often in my conversations, I hear someone talking to me about the Society Journal. Quite often there isn't a Society Journal, there is a range of Society journals. But there's also, and more this is the case nowadays, there is a portfolio. So there are B2B content within that portfolio. So that could be anything from a Society newsletter all the way up to a full-blown magazine. Some of those magazines even have peer-reviewed content in as well. They may do other educational activities. In fact, more and more nowadays they are doing so, certainly with the increase in e-learning activities. But quite often they will have congresses or they have regional teaching meetings that can be, could be quite useful. And they may be wealthy and have impressive offices. If you look at the American Diabetes Association, for example, they're very prestigious, they're very big, they're very wealthy, they have offices that right next to the Pentagon, it's all very flash. You look at some smaller societies that I'm not going to mention, have very small offices, and you end up sat on a box in a corner with a mug of coffee when you're chatting to them. So you get a whole range of different societies, and how you interact with them changes depending on what their structure is. What do societies do? Some of these things are the obvious things. I'll put these on first. So the first thing to keep in mind is they represent the interests of their members. This is quite an interesting point because it is very obvious, but it is very often forgotten when I'm talking to industry. So industry are more interested in putting their, or quite often interested in putting their message out. That's what they're being paid for, that's what you're looking to achieve, that's what you're being targeted for. When you're talking to a society, they're not very interested a lot of times in your message. They're interested in value for their members because they're representing their members. So you've got to put your educational message and talk about what you're talking about within the context of what the society membership would be interested in hearing. The best way to find that out is to talk to them. So if you talk to editors and you talk to society officials about what would be useful for their community, you quite often get a lot of useful insight in how you should be interacting with that community in a way that will drive engagement, but will also get the societies working with you. They provide training and educational programs. They obviously publish content. Most societies will have a society journal or some kind of content that they interact with, engage with their members with. They can award prizes. They provide advice to and help the community that they're in. That's what they exist for. They quite often fund projects. Some societies do a lot more than this. So certainly the bigger ones, the ones that are more engaged with the community that they're in, so they can quite often regulate professional accreditation. That's quite a good indication of whether a society has the whole community within their remit, because if the community needs professional accreditation, it's provided by the society, you're going to get a very high percentage of that community being members of the society. But they can also provide expert consultation to government, lobbying governments on things that are important. You quite often hear, for example, in the UK, you'd hear the Royal Colleges coming up on the radio with positions and statements on what the government are doing. They work with professional standards boards. They advocate for the field within society, with the wider society. That can be lobbying for government money, but it can also just be for the level of PR within the community. And they can sometimes advise universities and teaching institutions on the training of students. The bottom line with all societies is that they are there to support the development of their field. That's really important when you're engaging with societies and trying to work in partnership with them, because that is their main aim and objective. Very often when I'm talking to medcoms agencies and pharma companies, they think that the money is the thing that is going to get a society on board, because who doesn't want money? When you actually speak to societies and associations, revenue is important. They need it to continue what they're doing, but it's not why they exist. So it shouldn't be the number one thing that tries to persuade them to work with you on any particular product. So what are societies interested in? One of the main things they're interested in is publication quality. And there's a reason for this. So if you look at when we talk about publication quality, that's the content within the publication. So is it academically rigorous? Is it ethical? Is it right for that audience? So you'll find that editors are very picky quite often about what they put within a journal based on the audience that they're putting it to. And if it's a society journal, that audience is mainly going to be society members. But also the production quality and the service that is provided by the publisher, that's going to be of interest. The reason that that's so important, if you look at some surveys we've done within Wiley. This is a survey that was done to 1.2 million researchers. We've got 4,000 people coming back. And what they've said is across all the groups that we surveyed, the association publication is the #1 reason that they're part of that society. Generally, we've always assumed that the Congress, or have in the past, the Congress was as important as the publication. That doesn't tend to be the case nowadays. The association publication is still the #1. And if you look deeper into that, this is from the same survey. This is a mean ranking, so that the lower the number, the better the score. If you look at the top 5 reasons for joining across all of the groups, the #1, quality of research-based content. So essentially what we're seeing here is all members of a society are joining that society because of the research-based content that they get access to through that society. They will generally get the society publication for free if they're a member of that society. And they'll get other benefits around that content. So it's very important. Those are 2 things that I've just pulled out. This is just a bit of self-promotion here. If you're interested in digging deeper into that survey that we did, there's a number of white papers that we've put out from that survey, which are all for free. You can download them on the Wiley Exchange's website. The website address is at the bottom there. So you can find out a bit more about the sorts of things that we found when we dug into the society membership. So what else are they interested in? They're interested in making an impact. They exist because they want to further their field, they want to support their field. To do that, they've got to make an impact in that field. So they want to contribute, and you'll find this not just with the journals, but with the other activities that the society do. The main thing they're trying to do is push their field. It's quite interesting when you talk to societies, they can do this in a number of different ways. So some of them like to be the cutting edge, and they like to produce content that is really pushing the knowledge and the boundaries of understanding. Others like to step back a little bit and just be behind the curve, so they don't like stuff that's a bit too controversial. If you talk to the publishers when you're working with a society, if a publisher is working with a society, then it's quite useful to get that kind of gauge because it can help you address that community. They're also looking, and this is quite often lost on the industry representatives that I talk to, they are actually looking to make a real world impact. They are looking to change prescribing behaviour. They're looking to change management of disease. They're looking to change patient population health. They're really looking to make an impact and a difference in the world. Working with pharmaceutical companies, working with medcoms agencies is a way to do that, but it needs to be done in the right way with the right balance. They're also interested in remaining relevant. One of the biggest things that societies are dealing with now is trying to keep membership up. So they've got to be relevant to those society members, and they've got to be relevant to a broader readership, so they can engage the wider society and to increase their own membership. It's one of the key things they're looking for. So anything that you approach a society with, you need to keep. I've said all this already, but you need to keep the aims and objectives of those memberships front and centre, because that's what's going to be most important to the society. So, when engaging with societies, focus on making sure that their brand isn't at risk. Okay, so everything that we do, every conversation with a society, it's got to be an ethical conversation. It's got to make sure that their brand survives into the next decade and the decade beyond. Quite often with societies, you have people that take stewardship of that part of the society for a short period of time. It could only be 1 or 2 years. They're going to be quite risk averse. So anything that we do has got to make sure that the brand of that society is maintained and the integrity of that society is maintained. The quality of any content needs to be high. This is the same, engaging with any kind of society or journal publication. Content quality is very important. But also, how does that relate to the membership? How do we engage with the membership? How relevant is it to that membership? And this is content that's put into journals, but it's also educational activities and projects that go around journals that are content driven. We do a lot of this at Wiley. A lot of other big publishers work with industry doing this. How can you get your educational message out, not just through the content, but through spinning other pieces of content as well? And it's all about engaging membership. It's all about educational value. It's all about the content of quality. It's not so much about the revenue. The revenue is important, but it comes later on. Okay. Also, when engaging with societies, make sure you work through the publisher. Okay, if there is one. There are some societies that are self-published. There isn't an associated publisher with them. If there is one, the publisher is going to help you. The publisher will generally take on the peer review system, the copy editing, all of the production online and print distribution, publication, things that are associated with publication, all the way through to the sales and the journal management. So the publisher is involved with that whole part of the society. If you go direct to the society, it's very likely that they'll push you back through the publisher anyway. Okay, so you'll just get redirected into the publishing part of the business. And again, why should you work with the publisher? The other thing that we do with societies is that we help them keep financially stable. Okay, so we provide revenue for that society. That's very important to us as a publisher, because we're a business, we need to make money as well. But it's very important to the societies. I've downplayed it up to now. It is important, but it's the least important thing when you're talking about educational projects with the society, but it is still there. So we quite often will provide royalties on revenues to society, we'll underwrite their editorial operations, we'll hold strategy meetings, we'll invest on behalf of the society into technological innovations, and we create content outside of the general publishing content, just submitting a journal into an article into a journal. We would create quite often spin-off pieces of content or other pieces of content. So if you work with the publisher, it's in the publisher's interest to actually get your project working with the society. So the publisher will help you in any way they can to engage with that society and to sort out any barriers that there are. So remember, a couple of last points when engaging with societies. I've focused quite a lot on the aims and objectives. That's a really key one, making sure that the aims and objectives are the front and centre of what you do when you talk to societies. It's also worth pointing out, because I see this over and over again, editors aren't societies, societies aren't editors. And what I mean by that is editors will generally be appointed by societies, but they have an arm's length agreement. So they will work with the journal publication, but the society won't have any influence, or they shouldn't have any influence over the content of that journal. So when you're talking about a project around a journal, you would initially be working with the editor, but you've also got to keep in mind that the society may have a permission or a veto on those projects. So you quite often have to work with the editor and the society together to make sure that you get the permissions you need. Certainly the way to notice this is if you ever need a society branding, logo or endorsement on anything you need to do, you'd move away from the journal. If you're just talking about the journal, quite often you can work just with the editor, but not always, because sometimes the editor still needs society permission. The publisher is the person that will help you, guide you through and navigate you through that. Thank you very much.